Good evening, and welcome to our continuing series, Explorations in Savitri, with Dr. Alak Pandey. Namaste. We are in Book 2, the book of the Traveler of the Worlds, Canto 8, The World of Falsehood. And we have maybe 2 more evenings to go,
Yes.
and we'll be out of it.
Yes. Maybe today and the next one.
Yeah, today and the next one. Let us hope. We are on page 227, just after the break. We had those last great lines, and the last line of all, none can reach heaven who has not passed through hell.
So by conclusion, if you have not passed through hell, you are not yet a candidate for heaven.
Right, right.
I remember Prapatti ji used to be there, with Babaji Maharaj in Odisha, gone around, and very beautiful instrument of mother. And once somebody asked him that, in my life everything has been very nice. So isn't it all grace? So he spontaneously remarked, maybe the divine has not yet looked towards you.
Whoa.
So, of course, this may be a little bit exaggeration, but then it is true because it arises from the nature of things. Because this darkness is not outside or elsewhere; it is within us. And when its cleaning starts, it's bound to go through this process of purification, which takes 12 years at least. That's what Sri Aurobindo says. So it's a long process. Long period. Pranabdha, I was reading, how he would go through his own, he says that I realized then that it was a process of purification. And he says he came to the ashram in early 40s. I'm not sure, 43, 44 or like that. And he says in 67, he says it took so many years to arrive at that basic stability. Yes, now that whole thing is cleared. He says after so many years of stay.
And I must say, when I met him towards the end of his days, there was so much light in him.
Oh, so much change. I remember asking him, what do you want? Because he was in nursing home. I thought he was mumbling something, asking for some help. He said, I want peace and love in the whole world. So,
When I was 23, Aurobindo Basu took me to Nishikanto for his birthday. And that story of Nishikanto,
yes,
we should recount.
Yes.
Because, he was a great poet. And Sri Aurobindo told him, if you go outside in the world, you will be revered as a great poet. But if you stay here with me, you will have illness after illness. And he said, I'll stay.
He said that, but am I not child of Mother Kali? So what does it matter?
Yeah.
So he stayed, and sure enough, his body was a living laboratory. He would laugh at it.
Yeah.
If somebody had some illness like pain in the joints and little gastritis, he would laugh condescendingly and say, what? Just for this, he is making such a fuss. Look at me, which part of mine is not affected?
Well, there's the story that when he was actually dying at one point.
Yes.
And they took him to the meditation room. And he asked Mother to come down. And she came down. And he said, Mother, put your foot on my chest. And he lived for 15 more years. And then his famous joke was, suppose I had asked Mother to put both feet.
He was full of humor. So that's the difference. Everybody has to go through these challenges. The difference is those who take the sunlit path go through it smilingly, laughingly. And those who try it just by their own effort, etc., they go through it grudgingly, complainingly. But nevertheless, once you are on board, you are on board. So this too, the traveler of the worlds must dare. Because he is a traveler of the worlds. He is not a traveler of one world, which is a high typal world, not a traveler of Vaikuntha or Swarga, but a traveler of the world. So entire creation which is within us, we have to confront. A warrior in the dateless duel's strife. He entered into dumb, despairing night. So this dateless dual strife is going on even before actually creation came, and that's what Mother mentions. It's the fight between the gods and the titans, and she says that the first creation became titanic when it entered into darkness, and as a second line, the gods came. After that, we see actually creation beginning. So it's a strife which starts before time is born at some level. He entered into the dumb, despairing night, challenging the darkness with his luminous soul. This is the most important thing for us. The psychic being, the soul within, has the power to challenge it. Nothing else can. Those who pursue yoga with the mind, those who pursue yoga even with some kind of an emotional heart or with passions, when they actually confront this darkness, it's very simple to read it here, but we can see how challenging it can be. But when the soul has emerged, then everything else is luminous and safe. You have to still go through it, but it's a much safer passage.
But Ashwapati, Sri Aurobindo,
Yes.
alarms the gloom.
Yes,
with just
alarming
steps.
with his steps the threshold gloom. Alarming with his steps the threshold gloom, he came into a fierce and dolorous realm, full of pain, full of hardness, harshness, cruelty, sorrow, peopled by souls who never had tasted bliss, ignorant like men born blind who know not light. They could equate worse still with highest good. And we see it happening nowadays.
Yeah.
Worse still, killing is bad, killing innocents, killing children, killing women, killing, and you say this is our road to gain the God's blessings, highest good. Worse still with highest good. Virtue was to their eyes a face of sin, and evil and misery were their natural state. So that's why they couldn't understand and they couldn't know what it means to be good. They had never known what is goodness. In that sense, they had never tasted bliss. Now comes an important line. A dire administration's penal code, making of grief and pain the common law, decreeing universal joylessness, had changed life into a stoic sacrament and torture into a daily festival. Sometimes some of the children who come out from here, they get this impression, unfortunately, from whosoever they come in contact with, that on one side they feel Sri Aurobindo was a knowledgeable philosopher and thinker, and on the other side, Mother was a rigid and strict disciplinarian. So I remember having interaction with some of them. I said, I don't know what you are taught, but I know that Sri Aurobindo is a heart of infinite compassion. And Mother is boundless love. That is how at least I have experienced them constantly. And Mother speaks of that, two things you must never forget.
Yes.
Sri Aurobindo's compassion and the Mother's love.
Yes.
But we turn her into a rigid and strict authoritarian and disciplinarian. This is in our mind, not in her consciousness. So when we read, and this is a state of consciousness, a kind of humanity which wants to make yoga appear like that. An act was passed to chastise happiness. Laughter and pleasure were banned as deadly sins. A questionless mind was ranked as wise content, a dull heart's silent apathy as peace. Someone asked Sri Aurobindo that it is said that a Siddha never laughs. Sri Aurobindo said, on the contrary, if a Siddha never laughs, his Siddhi is not perfect. It is part of the perfection of the Siddha that he can laugh. That's
And
why
he
laughing
was-
Buddha is so,
And Sri Aurobindo was so full of
full
humor.
of humor.
Oh.
Once,
It's the salt of the earth.
someone was telling me his own story. When he was a child, he used to laugh. And he would laugh uncontrollably. I know the person. So, even now, if he would see you at a distance and he knows you, he just can't help it. It's a way of greeting, he'll burst into laughter. And what a laughter that, it'll take time to, give a pause. So one day I asked him, how did you manage in the ashram around the samadhi? He said, I used to have this uncontrollable habit. And some people complain to Ravindraji that, he laughs too much and it disturbs all of us. So Ravindraji went to mother. Then he came back. He had told this boy, I am going to mother. He said, okay. So when he came back, he said, you want to know mother's reply? He said, yes, of course. He said, mother said, tell him to laugh a lot more louder than he does, because I am not able to hear his laughter yet. His story, he himself told me. He said then it was the end of everybody's, tell him to laugh a bit more louder. But we chastise happiness. You'll see some of this brood everywhere who literally make you feel that, if you are happy, you are committing a sin. If you are smiling, you have become brushed from the yoga. If you are enjoying a gulab jamun, you have, lost your way. So Sri Aurobindo is describing these things come from the world of falsehood. This is not how divine, Even there are people who believe if you go and eat outside, means you have...
Oh yeah.
Yoga is confined to a rigid, formal, external way of life. Whereas yoga is always an inner living. It's a joyous, spontaneous outflowering of the soul, giving itself in rapture to the divine. And then what it receives, it says, epics. As Sri Aurobindo says about the bhakta, he says, nothing is withheld from the bhakta. Nothing is impossible for him. The human tongue cannot utter all the varieties of experience that the bhakta can have. And there is nothing is impossible for him, nothing is denied to him. For indeed, he is the very self of the beloved. So, that is a relation we have to build with the divine, where we can laugh with him, dine with him. Mother herself, there used to be mother's kitchen where nice dishes were prepared. But it's there. It's a very dangerous tendency. There is a joy in dining room food and it's something sacred and prasad. But sometimes people believe if you don't take dining room food, if you have gone nearby and eaten some food, you have done a great sin for which. So we have to understand that don't turn it into a dogma. It's all right. I mean, it's wonderful. But don't turn it into a dogma. So this is how chastise happiness. Laughter and pleasure were banned as deadly sins. Even we have in Islam.
Yes.
Though it's such a strange paradox that some of the finest architecture, music and poetry has come from Islam.
Yeah.
The Sufi movement. But hardcore Islam believes that anything to do with art, painting, poetry, music is a sin. So it is banned. If you go to the strict Sunnis, it's believed that you're not supposed to. So mind should be questionless. That is wisdom. Sleep was not there. Torpor was the sole rest. Death came, but neither respite gave nor end. Always the soul lived on and suffered more. Because it's not easy to exit from this realm. If you are caught there.
Sounds like Dante.
Yes. Sounds like his vision of hell.
Yes.
Ever he deeper probed that kingdom of pain. Around him grew the terror of a world of agony followed by worse agony. And in the terror a great wicked joy. Glad of one's own and others' calamity. I have a feeling that many of these people who devised this idea of hell were basically belonging to this state of consciousness. So they eventually must have the revenge. So they created hell, where sinners will rot. And those who have particularly done harm to them, they will definitely rot. So the idea of hell, but Sri Aurobindo takes a dig at it. He says, if God created hell, it would be made out of love. It would be an act of his love,
Yes.
like a shortcut to. He says, I think much more wisely of several places. Another place he says that people believe that women were created for the downfall of men, and he says, I think more wisely both of God as well as of women. So this idea that chastise happiness, cut off any joy of life. Even Sri Aurobindo goes on to say one of the things required in this yoga is Judi Vivre, the joy of life. Of course, he says we must not confuse it with the true soul joy and the higher bliss. That's true. But cheerfulness is the soul of sadhana, salt of sadhana, cheerfulness. And why would one be serious when one is going to the all delightful? Long back, Indra Sen had come to Pune, and he had Parkinson's, all his body was trembling. And he had come to receive an award from Indian Science Congress. And there was a man who always used to remain very glum and gloomy. And he asked him, when one does sadhana, doesn't one become serious? So Indra Sen said, yes, but that is an inner thing. One is full of joy, which burst out in all one's. So he said, no, but if one is doing serious sadhana, intense sadhana, he said, then the joy also is more intense. So I still remember that. The joy also is more intense. After all, you are coming closer to the all love and all blissful. Their thought and life were a long punishment, the breath a burden, and all hope a scourge. The body a field of torment, a massed unease. Repose was a waiting between pang and pang. This was the law of things none dreamed to change. A hard, somber heart, a harsh, unsmiling mind, rejected happiness like a cloying sweet. Tranquility was a tedium and ennui. If one was tranquil, one said, this is boring. Tranquility was a tedium.
Yeah.
And all happiness, joy, smile, sweetness was to be rejected. Only by suffering life grew colorful. Only by suffering life grew colorful. It needed the spice of pain, the salt of tears. Otherwise it became very boring, But truly speaking, the ascension towards the divine should be a thing of sweetness, calm, joy, peace, because that's the nature of the divine, tranquil. But, one wants excitement, and then it's opposite, despair. Without going into seas of despair, how Dilip Kumar Roy used to go into these swings. And once he wrote to Sri Aurobindo that I have decided to deal harshly with my vital nature. And he says, so from now on I have these proposals. One is I am going to shave off my head. Second, I'll always wear this kind of dress. And third is that I'll start fasting so many days, etc., etc. I hope you are happy with my proposal. Sri Aurobindo writes back, I am horrified at your proposal. And then he says that if you won't eat, what you will look like. It's a very funny letter. And at the end of it he says, and a shaved head. Man, mosquitoes will bite over it. And think about all the red spots that will glow on your head. I can't imagine. Please abandon this whole proposal. So these people who are very indulgent in one part of nature, they have this tendency to, as a contrary measure, to go into harsh asceticism.
He called Nirod the man of sorrows.
Yes.
And Nirod was always asking what to do, and he said, laugh and grow fat.
Yes.
Then dance to keep the fat down.
But those who have this tendency in one part, they become harshly ascetic in another.
Yeah.
Whereas true spiritual life is a life of balance and moderation. Mother speaks of it, Buddha spoke about it, Sri Krishna spoke about it. Every person worth his grain has spoken about a life of balance and moderation.
But we see this love.
Even this Upanishadic line, which people often quote, Shurasya dhara nishita duratya, as you walk on a blade. So, one interpretation is you must be very stiff. But my understanding is very different. So what happens when you walk on the blade? You have to keep the perfect balance. If you go to this side, you fall. If you go to other side, you cut yourself. So it's like you have to keep the balance, not swing to this extreme or the other extreme.
The razor's edge.
Razor's edge. That's how I understand the razor's edge. It's not giving yourself pain and mortifying yourself.
But we see even today that many religions need that sorrow.
It's very unfortunate.
It's very sad.
Very unfortunate.
It's very sad.
The whole conception of hell and all this, even Puranas, what horrible hells they have created where you are roasted, you are put into. And when I had read all this as a child, I said, he's such a god, it's not worth worshipping. What is this? He's torturing people, he's nothing good to do. you have brought out creation, which is okay, beautiful. And you have given us a possibility to unite with you, which is super beautiful. Leave aside the manifestation and other thing. There is so much joy in creation. There are difficulties, challenges. But to create the conception of sin and hell, in fact, Sri Aurobindo writes in one of his letters to Sarojini, his sister.
Yes.
He says, after coming from Kolkata, Baroda has become twice worse. And then he gives the example of that punishment is given to, who was that fellow who had pointed out, Judas, that, after 6 months of roasting in hell, as a mercy, he was asked one day he could sit on the ice in North Pole to cool himself. Yeah. So Sri Aurobindo says this always sounded to me as a
like worst torture.
Because 6 months if you are roasting, after a while you are comfortable. But then you have got adjusted to that heat. Now suddenly you are sent to North Pole and then again you come back. So Sri Aurobindo takes a dig at, even in his problem of rebirth and tangle of karma in Indian theory, he says it is so strange, either you say that you will be punished in hell, or you say in next life you will be given, you'll be born as this or that. So he says, what is this law that people have created in Hindu thought? Yes. That you will go to hell first for your sins, then you will be born as this double punishment. It's a non-existent thing. It doesn't sound logical. But human beings believe in it. It makes them feel happy. If one could cease to be, all would be well. Else only fierce sensations gave some zest. A fury of jealousy burning the gnawed heart. That's why Mother has said one of the worst poisons that can not only gnaw at the heart, it can actually finish the soul, is jealousy. Yes. He said this is like a real poison. It springs, it's equivalent to cobra poison. That's how I look at it. So jealousy, even in sadhana people become jealous. So and so is closer to Mother and why am I far away? So we don't know the mystery. So she says that jealousy and fear sensations, anger, lust was the stuff of life there.
Envy, yes.
Envy, then and outwardly it manifested through drugs and all these terrorist group. Mm-hmm. If you really go into their life, they feed on very strong sensations. Whether it is lust or whether it's drugs, you'll see invariably a link. And people have found it. Much in Kashmir is, and elsewhere, ISIS, it's funded by drug market. So because, these things, the need for strong sensations, otherwise you don't feel alive. You must do that. The sting of murderous spite and hate and lust, the whisper that lures to the pit and treachery stroke through vivid spots on the dull, aching hours. That's the only sensation God's peace, bliss are alien because it's so hard. That's why the vital has to be refined and the soul has to, discover that beauty of life to even feel God's peace and presence. And that you see in some of these temples, the kind of noise they would make and everywhere, the kind of, sometimes you feel God must have run away with Lord Ganpati, with all these drunkards dancing with all the dhol. So I pity Lord Ganpati that, I pity your state. I can move away from here, you can't. Because, he is bhakta, he is tied to his bhakta.
3 weeks I had it at the temple here.
Yes, but it's a hell. It's a torture.
Stop.
It's a
In
torture.
fact,
you
the
know.
goddess came to me and said, "Help me."
Oh, I'm sure. Even I have Ramakrishna's story regarding this, but some other time. To watch the drama of infelicity, the writhing of creatures under the harrow of doom, and sorrow's tragic gaze into the night, and horror and the hammering heart of fear were the ingredients in time's heavy cup that pleased and helped to enjoy its bitter taste. You see, this you will see characteristically in all these ISIS kind of groups. They take a joy in exhibiting that horror so that not only the immediate victim, world over, they can spread this hate. And the television people should not show it repeatedly. It's not a healthy thing because you're transmitting that vibration, like suicides.
But they're doing just.
But
the
they're doing
opposite.
it just the
Yeah,
opposite,
yeah.
probably unwittingly or whatever. Not ignorance, but ignorance is no excuse. And then they want the victim to plead because it gives them a great joy.
Yeah.
And there are stories in Indian at least thought, and I'm sure they are everywhere, of bravery and courage where the man who stood before the gallows said, "I refuse to plead
Yeah.
because I don't want to give you the satisfaction that you get from my pleading and my crying and my sorrow," because they feed on that. And if you meet them with the calm eye, then it unnerves them because they don't know it.
Yes.
I mean, they don't grow fat, they grow lean and thin. Of such fierce stuff was made up life's long hell. These were the threads of the dark spider's web. See, Sri Aurobindo had seen about this dark spider, which mother had seen much earlier in
Yes. Yes.
in Paris and other
In Paris,
places.
yeah.
Yes. You see why the spider in Upanishad, the spider is used in an analogy to speak of creation. How this creation has emerged? It's emerged as the spider brings out the web from within itself. So that is, of course, the spider in the higher sense, the greater sense. But this is the counterpart, the shadow, the dark spider, who also has its net, the dark net of forces in which it captures its prey. So that's how it's the dark spider, in which the soul was caught, quivering and wrapped. This was religion. This was nature's rule. And they are very, evangelistic, and how they catch, how they, turn away the minds of people, youngsters, and totally brainwashed. Because it's a spider's net, the dark spider's net, and it's very powerful. Behind such instrument, it is that which is acting. It's not about what that person is speaking. He becomes an instrument of these forces, dark forces. They capture the net and the mind and completely change the thinking. And people are willing to do such atrocious things.
And hundreds are coming from the West to join them.
Everywhere. It's a terrible thing. In a fell chapel of iniquity, to worship a black, pitiless image of power, kneeling one must cross hard-hearted, stony courts, a pavement like a floor of evil fate. This is actually a physical place, and I need not specify it. Sri Aurobindo comes so close to, describing this. Each stone was a keen edge of ruthless force, and glued with the chilled blood from tortured breasts. The dry, gnarled trees stood up like dying men, stiffened into a pose of agony. So you see, just like Mantri Mandir is the manifestation of a greater perfection, divine perfection. So there are places which in the name of religion and worship are manifestation of something very dark. And they manifested physically upon earth to draw people and hold them captive. And from each window peered an ominous priest, chanting Te Deums for slaughter's crowning grace. Uprooted cities, blasted human homes, burned writhen bodies, the bomb cells massacre. So you see, the two great wars,
There it is.
and of course, what we see today is nothing but that last remnants of this this kind of a consciousness. Mother long back had a vision where she saw she is fighting with terror, and at the end terror is defeated. And she says that it means in principle it is gone, but it has many emanations, and so it will try its last ditch effort to hold people, their consciousness, their imagination,
Yes.
and to terrorize the world. And so what we are seeing now is actually a dying past. Its acme was Hitler.
Do you remember Mother's words before dying?
Falsehood rises to its full swing.
Yes, rises to its full
So
strength.
its acme was at a certain age of time, and now we see these are small little things which are going to, of course, go away. And all this he has foreseen. That means he has done what is needed for it to be done. The bombshells massacre. Our enemies are fallen, they sang. All who once stayed our will are smitten and dead. How great we are, how merciful art thou. You know, this tendency is so dangerous. I remember even here, sometimes this tendency came when, there was fight between groups. And there were people who were taking great joy if somebody from the opposite group seemingly fell ill. And see, mother has punished. So once when I came to say, I said, either you don't know mother or you have shut your heart to her love.
Yeah.
Mother has punished. Means it's all her life she has been talking of love and compassion and grace. Mother has punished. And these stories were going around. Or people were invoking the divine to hurt the enemy. So these tendencies are there in human nature. Of course, what we see outwardly as an extreme tendency in Taliban and ISIS, they are external manifestations of something which in a subtle way exists within us. Now this is important because we have to uproot it within us. We can't go and fight on the borders and destroy it there, but we have to destroy it subtly. Each time we get within us an unkind thought, an ungenerous thought, or we believe that God has punished so and so for his sins, we must look at ourselves. And this is what is there in the Christ story. And Sri Aurobindo reminds us of that story of Christ.
Yes.
Even Mother reminds that when you throw a stone, first think of, whether how pure you are, how good you are, before you throw a stone.
Let him who is without sin cast the first stone.
Yes. And both in different contexts remind of this story.
Yeah.
So, that's the state we have to rise up into. And not this state that, our enemies are fallen. God has, how merciful he is.
Yeah.
All who once stayed our will are smitten and dead. How great we are. How merciful art thou. Look at the paradox.
Yeah.
Thus thought they to reach God's impassive throne and him command whom all their acts opposed. That, I am the closer one to God. Magnifying their deeds to touch his skies and make him an accomplice of their crimes. Look at this. There no relenting pity could have place, but ruthless strength and iron moods had sway, a dateless sovereignty of terror and gloom. This took the figure of a darkened God, revered by the ragged wretchedness he had made, who held in thrall a miserable world, and helpless hearts, nailed to unceasing woe, adored the feet that trampled them into mire. Such was the image of God. Like a Rakshasa. Sri Aurobindo's poem, The Rakshasa, where Ravana tells Shiva, I worship you. Why? Because you are a pitiless image of power. Ruthless. I want to be ruthless like you. So I'll finish all those who have bhakti because they don't know you. So he worships Shiva as, he says, you are the supreme Rakshasa. Sri Aurobindo says that. You are the supreme Rakshasa. An image of absolute power. Shiva is Ashutosh. He forgives even the worst Rakshasas if once he says, he is quick to please. But Ravana doesn't see him like that. He sees him as image of power. Absolute power. And so he worships him. Sri Aurobindo says even about this yoga, many came drawn by the power We will become supramental beings, therefore
Oh,
we will
yes.
lord over human beings.
Yes.
Because we will be greater than what ordinary humanity. So people started making it into an elitist club. And Shobindu would warn against it.
Yeah.
It's not an elitist club, or the closer you go to the divine, more humble you become, because you discover the infinity. The sign that you are far from the divine is that you are filled with your pride.
And spiritual ego.
Yes. It was a world of sorrow and of hate. Sorrow with hatred for its lonely joy. Hatred with others' sorrow as its feast. A bitter rictus curled the suffering mouth. A tragic cruelty saw its ominous chance. So, sorrow, which takes you into tamas, hatred, which excites you, makes you feel alive. Hate was the black archangel of that realm. Archangels are messengers of God, but this was hate. It glowed, a somber jewel in the heart, burning the soul with its malignant rays, and wallowed in its fell abysm of might. That's why Mother has said hatred, jealousy. You see, before they can hurt anybody else, they hurt, of course. And they create so much chaos in the world, confusion in the world. But they first hurt you, your own soul. Others is a later issue. Yes, they are dark things. But the heart that holds, how horrible it is. These passions, even objects, seem to exude. This is the truth behind, evil totems. Just as you have blessing packets, you have things which can bring harm. And they are charged with malignant vibrations and ill will. That's why there was a time in the ashram, and even now its essence is important, that people didn't take anything from anybody just like that. And this is the famous story of Pavitrada. Somebody brought him some tomatoes to make soup. Of course, there is a long story behind it, but just to cut it short. So he said, I'm sorry friend, but I can't accept it like that. I have to ask mother. So he asked the mother. Mother said, only one last time. Now, it should not be made into dogma that don't take anything from anyone. But mother always would say you should be very careful what you are accepting from where. Because it's not an object, it is the consciousness which is
Yes.
behind.
Sri Aurobindo tells that story with, Narod tells Sri Aurobindo that every time he goes to see Dilip Kumar Roy, he comes back and he doesn't feel well. And Sri Aurobindo says he's not only feeding your stomach, he's feeding your sorrow.
Yes. So these are whom we meet, sometimes photographs, somebody who was chronically ill. And when mother went to the person's room, she saw a picture of one of these gurus who were obviously not the right person. And she immediately said, this is the reason.
Yeah.
So, we have to be so careful. Mixing influences is so dangerous in sadhana. Friendly to all, love for all, goodwill for all is wonderful. We must have. But it's not friendly. Love and goodwill for all, Shobindu says, love and goodwill for all should not translate into freely mixing with all. Because that's where you have to be careful about. Love and goodwill you should have for all. Because even objects, for mind overflowed into the inanimate, that answered with the wickedness it received. Some stones can be charged like that, just as some can be charged with divine vibrations. Against their users used malignant powers, hurt without hands, and strangely, suddenly slew, appointed as instruments of an unseen doom. This kind of black magic is known, in many parts of the world.
Yes.
In India, it used to be like, now it's going around again, recently, the story of cutting the braid, the hairs. So in India, we grew up with this idea that you should be careful where you dispose your hairs. So when barbers used to cut our hairs, so we used to, it was not just, just thrown anywhere. It had to be disposed properly. Because they can be misused by people to draw you and, harm you or hurt you, because it's a part of your body. Just like relics of the divine. So they are relics of a different kind. Not relics, but portion of your being, portion of your body, and they can be used. So, it's not just for nothing that mother even has a saloon here. It's not just, it's not just that we need a department, somebody can do the hair cutting. But in every act of her, there was a profound, deeper wisdom. So we actually have saloon, and both even girls who want to get their hair cut, there is something like that in the ashram context. It's not to feel afraid or anything, but to know things as they are and then to be careful. That's all. It's like knowing occult truth and occult wisdom. Then we are, want from within where we should and we should not. Or they made themselves a fateful prison wall where men condemned wake through the creeping hours, counted by the tollings of an ominous bell. An evil environment worsened evil souls. Of course, we must give it with the rider. There is nothing like an evil soul or a wicked soul. So Sri Aurobindo is using it here figuratively, poetically. The soul which is so completely identified with the evil of that domain, because Mother was very clear when somebody asked, and Sri Aurobindo also, that all psychic beings are related to the divine. And somebody's used the word wicked soul. And Mother immediately said, what do you know about the soul? All souls are portions of the divine. They are beautiful. So you should not use this word wicked souls. So here this evil souls is about those beings, their self, and how much it was identified with it. All things were conscious there and all perverse, making it even worse. Because there is an unconscious ill will, which is quite common in the world. And there is a conscious ill will, which makes it much worse. Couple of lines and then we stop. In this infernal realm he dared to press, even into its deepest pit and darkest gore, perturbed its tenebrous base, dared to contest its ancient privileged right and absolute force, the right of the soul, the right of love, the right of happiness to be. In night he plunged to know her dreadful heart. In hell he sought the root and cause of hell. And I feel this is where people have missed. Very often people have tried to explain evil, but they have always explained it by going above and seeing from above. But Sri Aurobindo, as far as I know, is the first yogi, if I may use the word, who has gone into hell to know the cause of hell. So he knows the root of evil, and that is why he doesn't blame it on man's karma.
And to bring there the light.
Yes, and to bring the light there and to give the radical cure.
Yes.
So we'll stop here, and on Monday we will meet. I think that will be the last session. We have 2.5 pages, yes.